1970s gave listeners at both KTIB and KHOM the voice of Ken Berthelot, a versatile employee who went the extra mile in presentation. To this day, working in Bayou Country has many pleasant memories. Mr. Ken Berthelot, how are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start from the beginning. Are you from this part of the country originally?
I'm from New Orleans. My wife is from Houma.
All right. Now, what university did you go to?
I went to Louisiana Tech University and was lucky enough to be there the same 4 years Terry Bradshaw was quarterbacking the Bulldogs.
All right. And ironically, about 30 miles down the road, I went to NLU.
Yes. An arch rival of the Bulldogs.
Very much, and to some degree to this day as well, but two fine schools nonetheless.
Yes.
Now, well, how did you get interested in broadcasting? Was it something from when you were younger?
When I was younger, I used to sit in the backyard and listen to Harry Carey broadcast St. Louis Cardinal games. Now, this was before he went to the Cubs, so we're going way back now to the 1960s and actually late 50s. And I'd sit and listen to KMOX radio, a 50,000-watt giant out of St. Louis, and I just loved what he did and thought that might be what I wanted to do.
All right. Now, earlier this year, I had a chance to talk to a gentleman who you're very familiar with, of course, Mr. Raymond Sadie. And he informed me that when you graduated from college, that you actually had a degree in microbiology.
He informs you right. He's absolutely right. I was in pre-med thinking I might go to med school. Realized I didn't like the sight of blood when I had to stick my own finger to check out my cholesterol levels. And said, ooh, this is not for me. At the time, I'd also been doing a little spotting work at Louisiana Tech during the basketball season and sat next to the play-by-play guys there and really enjoyed what they did and said, well, this is what I'd like to do. So when I graduated from Louisiana Tech, I enrolled in a new school which had just opened in New Orleans called the Columbia School of Broadcasting. No longer here, but still in other parts of the United States. And there was an old NBC announcer named Tom Brent, and one of those guys who used to cup his hands around his ear and talk like he was the voice of the burning bush in the Ten Commandments movie. He had that deep, bellowing voice. And he said, goodness, he says, with that lower Ninth Ward accent, a Yat accent you've got from New Orleans, he said, the best I might be able to do for you is get you a job starting off in a small market radio station, and then you can practice and go from there. And he did. He got me my very first job working 6 to midnight on KTIB in Thibodaux, Louisiana.
Wow. Well, now, what was your beginning year here?
The beginning year there was 1972. I believe it was February 72.
Okay. Well, you come over here, and was Mr. Sadie the first person you spoke with?
Well, actually, Mr. Sadie wasn't there at the time. He had KHOM in Houma at the time, and KTIB was an AM/FM station at the time, and I believe that was owned by, I'm not sure if he was the owner, but he was the manager and the chief engineer, a gentleman named Hugh Smith.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you come into KTIB. What were your first duties?
Well, my first duties were to work the 6 to midnight shift, and at the time I didn't even find a place to live, so I was driving from New Orleans during the day, working 6 to midnight, then getting off and eating supper, and then driving back home to New Orleans. And I did that for about a month until I was able to find an apartment in Thibodaux.
Oh, okay.
And I worked the 6 to midnight shift, playing easy listening music, reading the news, and trying to work in a little bit of sports. And I remember they trained me the first night, and for 3 hours they had someone train me, and then at 9 o'clock, the guy said, well, just go ahead and sit down. I believe Hugh Smith was in the station at the time, and he said, well, you sit down and read the news now. And I got a little nervous because you sit behind, at that time, a big double microphone board, because FM was in stereo, and it was a simulcast. Of course, AM went off the air at 9 o'clock because of local sunset, and at that time. And he opened those mics, and I guarantee you, I thought I was on Radio Free Europe broadcasting around the world. I was so choked up, I couldn't talk. And about 20 seconds later, he closed the microphone because it was about 15, 20 seconds of dead air. I couldn't get anything out of my mouth. I was so nervous at the time. And he said, look, there's probably nobody listening. Just read the news. Now, he knew there was, but he said that so I wouldn't be nervous. He opened the mic, and bingo, I was able to read the news and get through that newscast.
Wow, sounds pretty amazing. Now, let me ask you this: since many people know you for sports, was it, and like you just said, when you came in, you were primarily doing the news and playing music. Was it not? How much longer was it after that you started doing, let's say, play-by-play?
Well, they didn't have sports on the station at the time. Remember, it was still KTIB-AM and FM.
Mm-hmm. And
the whole deal about the sports was I convinced them to let me come in the mornings on my time, free, and read some sports. They had some sportscasts to, at the time, Leo Albert's morning show, The Happy Hippo. And I did, and we emphasized local sports. People were going to get the national sports and the big-time sports, pardon me. People were going to get the national sports and the New Orleans sports and the Tulane and the LSU sports off the Baton Rouge and the New Orleans radio and television stations. So we emphasized Nickel State and all of the high schools in the area. And people started giving good comments to the station about the local sports. So I convinced them then to help me find a sponsor and broadcast high school football on Friday night.
Wow. And what was the first year that you started doing that?
Well, let's see. I started in February, and I believe we went right through the high school football season that summer.
Oh, wow.
So we did some high school football. I believe at the time the station had Nickel State basketball. And a gentleman, a very professional broadcaster from WWL-TV, was coming in to do those games for Nickel State named Jim Stone. Mm-hmm. And I was working the board, and I listened to him do basketball and learned a lot just by listening to his style. And he had a very good style, a very professional, casual style. And I had listened to a number of football and baseball play-by-play people. So the station was nice enough to let me do Nickel State baseball along with Phil Fellis, who was there at the time. And we did Nickel State baseball. Jim Stone did not return, so I was able to do Nickel State basketball the very next year and continued doing some high school football, and left soon after that to go to Channel 11, Lively 11 in Houma.
Well, if you went down to Channel 11, which I know was on the air in the 72, 73, 74 era, yes, you must have known Garland Robinette.
Garland was the news anchor. Ron Ray was one of the sports anchors. I was one of the sports anchors, and Phil Tellis was the sports director down there at the time.
I take it, was it a little disappointing that the station didn't last any longer, that is Channel 11?
Yeah, it really was, because I thought that it had all the potential in the world. And the nice thing about Channel 11 is, yes, they covered some Tulane and some LSU and some Saints, but the main coverage was television coverage for Thibodaux and Houma and Morgan City. It was the Tri-City, Tri-Parish television station. That's how they sold it on news and sports and weather. And wow, it was a great idea. I just wish it would have lasted, because I could see that thing growing into a station that would have broadcast high school or telecast high school football and basketball and Nickel State football and basketball, and that would have just been fabulous. And it's still sitting there dormant, and you just hate to see it.
Right. And when you mentioned Channel 11, there was another gentleman who also worked at KTIB, I believe had a variety show down there, Les Domain.
Absolutely. Everybody knew him. He was a big one and a good one, and maybe one of the more popular people in the entire station.
Very true. Now, when the station folded, I take it you went back into radio?
Well, when the station folded, I went back to work in radio with Ray Sadie, and I had known Ray and talked to Ray and had a keen interest in doing the Nickel State broadcast. He had acquired Nickel State from KTIB to be on KHOM and needed a play-by-play man, and brought me in to work some an announcing shift. 9 to noon was the starting shift that I worked, and read a little news and stuff like that, and then also did all of the Nickel State broadcast and sports.
Very good. Now, I take it when you're at KHOM, there's one gentleman I need to mention who was a pretty established on-air personality himself, Roy Vicknair.
Boy, after Ray Sadie himself, Roy Vicknair was probably one of the anchors and the staples of KHOM radio. I thought the guy would never retire. I thought he was born there, and when he retired, I think I cried, because probably along with Ray Sadie, those two guys, when you said KHOM, you thought those two guys, and Roy was a personality. He was a good, solid announcer with a lot of professionalism, and most of all, he was just a kind gentleman and a fine human being.
Another gentleman I believe you knew pretty well on radio down here, and he told me on the air that he, I think, taught you how to use the board at KHOM, Rick Luquette.
Absolutely. Rick Luquette, he knew both ends of the business, and that was one of his strengths. He knew the announcing end, but he also knew the technical end, and he was a technical whiz, taught me the board. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, and I was at a wedding in Houma, probably about within the last 5 to 6 months, and sure enough, who do you think I see as an acolyte on the altar is Rick Luquette. It was a pleasure to revisit with him and spend a little time with him.
Well, one gentleman I have to mention who was more on KTIB than KHOM, but had another close association with Nickel State, Roy Pugh.
Oh, Roy Pugh. Roy was not at the station when I was there, but after I had left Houma to go to Alexandria, and that was my first sports directing job, full-time at a television station, KALB in Alexandria, Louisiana. I think Roy came right after me and became the voice of the Colonels and really established himself in radio and as the voice of the Nickel State Colonels. And I'll tell you, there was a long time when you couldn't think of Nickel State without thinking of Roy Pugh as their voice. And what a professional, what a great job he did. And people don't realize when you get to the LSU Tulane level, you get so much extra help and so much is given to you. It's almost like coaching. The higher level sport you broadcast, the more that's actually is given to you and is available to you to really get the job done correctly. And when you get down to the smaller college level and the high school level, you're really scrambling to do a lot, put things together and yourself and things like that. And I think Roy just did a fabulous job all of those years being in charge of the Nickel State Network.
Very good. Now, also want to mention another person who was pretty well established in broadcasting in the Houma Thibodeau area, who I'm pretty sure you might have known as well, Marie Bergeron.
The Queen of News. Goodness, you couldn't think of broadcasting in Thibodeau or Houma without thinking of Marie Bergeron. She was the consummate news professional. She did such a fantastic job. Everybody knew her. If you walked on the streets with her, or if you had lunch with her, 1,000 people would stop by and say hello. She had contacts everywhere. Nothing could happen without Marie knowing that that it was going to happen or happened or whatever. And I think that says a lot for how hard she worked to be an excellent news person and a professional person. But most of all, again, one of the nicest people you ever want to meet. A down-to-earth person, just absolutely no arrogance whatsoever. A wonderful, wonderful human being.
Okay, so you leave the Houma Thibodeau area, and as you said, you go into television up in beautiful Alexandria. And how much longer after that did you go over to New Orleans to Channel 8?
I spent 4.5 years in Alexandria as the sports director at KALB-TV, and at that time did much in Alexandria of what I learned to do in Houma, and that is spend as much time as possible localizing the sports. When I was in Houma, one of the first coaches that I met was the athletic director and head football coach at Vanderbilt High School. His name was Brian Gano, still a very close friend of mine today. And Brian was one of the first people to tell me at the time. He said, you know, this is really special that you come out and cover the local high schools and the like, because up to now, very few people have spent time covering the high schools here in Houma and in Thibodeau and in this area. This is going to mean a lot for the kids, and that taught me a lesson right there. So when I went to Alexandria, I localized it for Northwestern State, Grambling, which was 2 hours, and Louisiana Tech, 2 hours to the north. And then, of course, you always spend time with LSU and a little bit with USL, but they had 3 television stations there and didn't need a lot of coverage from Alexandria. And you always bring Tulane into the area. And the Saints used to come down and do Saints interviews and bring that back to Alexandria, Louisiana, at a time when we didn't have satellite. So stations weren't exchanging interviews as much as they are now via satellite.
Oh, very interesting. So I take it, since you're from the New Orleans area originally, it must have been a real exciting day before you when you got the call that you get the chance to work back in your hometown?
It was super exciting. I used to get the Times-Picayune newspaper thrown to my door, the earliest edition, which would reach Alexandria, Louisiana, just so I could keep up with the radio television column. And one day I picked up the newspaper in the morning and opened it up, and it said that Mel Levitt, the great Mel Levitt, one of the great professionals, who did a lot of stuff with Channel 8, Focus, and political shows, and 30-minute specials and documentaries. But one of the things he did, he also anchored the weekend sports for a while when they were down in personnel. And for whatever reasons at the time, he decided he was going to leave Channel 8 for other reasons than sports. But because he left for whatever reason, it opened up the weekend sports job. So I called Buddy Diliberto immediately, and I said, Buddy, I'm from New Orleans. You've met me before. You've seen me covering the Saints at Saints games. You've seen me covering Tulane. You've seen me covering LSU. You know I know my way around the city. Probably wouldn't take long to train me. I'd love to have that job. He said, send me a tape. I put a tape on a Continental Trailway bus. My dad picked it up at the bus station. He went and put it in Buddy Diliberto's hands. He and Alec Gifford looked at it, and Alec was the news director, and he had to approve. And Buddy says, I like this guy, and if you like him, I'd like to hire him. And Alec approved. And to this day, Alec Gifford's still on Channel 6 in New Orleans, the NBC affiliate. I am forever indebted to him and to Buddy Diliberto for giving me that opportunity.
Wow, it sounds pretty exciting. And you spent a large part of the 80s over there at Channel. When exactly was your last year there?
Well, I started there in 1978 after 4.5 years in Alexandria. And I was there until Mac Brown's first season, actually through part of Mac Brown's first season in 1985. So it was almost 8 years at 8. And that's when Mac Brown recruited me to go to Tulane as his radio television man.
Wow. And I take it my old memory is right. You were with Tulane for quite a good while.
Yes, and actually they had an excellent play-by-play man there at the time named Don Crockett. And Don loved play-by-play, but he loved basketball. Basketball was his sport. He went crazy over basketball. And football and baseball were okay. He enjoyed it. He liked doing it, but he lived for basketball. Well, Mac had brought me in just to anchor his TV show and to develop maybe some television replay or possibly some pay-per-view, because LSU was bringing in a lot of money and having success with pay-per-view in Baton Rouge, and he thought maybe on a smaller scale in the New Orleans area we might be able to develop and make a little money off of pay-per-view. But if you remember right, Tulane had just gone through the basketball scandal, and Hyman Wall, the athletic director, had resigned. The university had dropped the basketball program. Dr. Raymond Kelly instituted the self-imposed death penalty. And Don Crockett, who was a good friend of mine, he went through one football season, and we got into basketball, and he was totally depressed. And he told me, he says, I don't think I'm going to stay with this anymore. He said, I love college basketball. It's not here. It may never come back. And it just means too much to me. I don't enjoy we weren't doing very much baseball at the time. And he said, I've just got other opportunities to go into politics in St. Tammany Parish, and I think I'm going to do that. I'm not going to stay for 11 games, to broadcast 11 games in a sport which I kind of like, but I had to give up the 31 games in a sport which I absolutely love. So he resigned. He went into politics and was successful in winning a school board seat in St. Tammany Parish. And Mac, that opened up the play-by-play job, and Mac asked me if I'd like to have it, and I said it would be an honor. And he says, well, you're hosting the TV show, and you're the new voice of the Greenway.
The years that you did it, was Steve Barrios your color man?
Steve Barrios was the color man in all but about 2 years. We had Bill Curl for a couple of years, and then Steve was doing some other things, and then when Steve became available again, we moved Steve back into the booth, and we actually were a three-man team for a while. And I'll tell you, sometimes you might think that a three-man team for radio would be too crowded. For television, it works better. But when you're working with two guys who like each other, like Steve Barrios and Bill Curl, and two guys who are absolutely funny, I mean, these guys can keep you laughing even during the rough times when you might not be winning a whole lot of games. And when some of that humor can spill over onto the air, like it did during our broadcast, now I'll tell you, it made it for 2 or 3 years of absolute fun. So had a couple of years with Bill Curl by myself, many years with Steve Barrios by himself, and then about 2 years where all three of us were together, and it was just super fun.
Was there any season in there, and I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I have to ask, what was probably the most exciting moment for you to cover with Tulane football?
Well, it would have to be the Tommy Bowden era and the undefeated season, and the reason I say that is because it was the first time in Tulane history that a team had gone undefeated. And that year of going 12-0, what made it so much fun was the coaches and the players. The players were so personable. There was a looseness on that football team where guys truly had fun. They really did like each other. There wasn't a lot of tension. It wasn't, oh my goodness, we've got a football game, let's get nervous and play it. They went out and, hey, whatever happens, happens. They were that confident in the system. And I learned, I always felt this way, but I think I learned this, and this era proved it, in that to have a successful football program, you have to have a head coach who's proven, and he's got to have a great system. And the system is the offensive and defensive coordinators and the people they bring in. And then you have to be able to have a quarterback that can get the job done. That offense that Rich Rodriguez ran with any other quarterback may not have been as successful, but Sean King was the perfect quarterback for that system, and it worked to perfection. And it's a shame because that was the team that should have been in the BCS, but instead they finished, I believe, 8th in the nation, won the Liberty Bowl, which was not a BCS bowl, and only finished 7th. And there was a group out of Sweden at the time, and I think you'll appreciate this, that had put a proposal together for the NCAA. It was a playoff system, and this playoff system would have carried a lot of money with it, but it would have been open to all schools. And had that playoff system been in effect at the time, Tulane, I believe, would have been, and I'm not positive of this, but if I think back, would have been seated about 9th or 10th. It would have opened up against a 6th or 7th Arizona team. And at that time, the coaches said, that's a team and a game we could have won. Now, after that, you don't know what would have happened. But I've learned to believe Bowden and Rodriguez because every year, as they went 19-4, they almost predicted every game they would win, how they would win it, and which games would be tough, and they were batting about 95%.
Okay, and I tell you what, and it's unfortunate that would also be the last season for Tommy Bowden moving on to Clemson. That must have been really sad news when you heard that.
Yeah, but again, at Tulane, you figure a coach who wins was not going to stay very long. I wanted him to stay, and the fans wanted him to stay, but history said that usually didn't happen. And as a coach won, they went on to a bigger conference, and more importantly, bigger money for a coach. Coaches, you may look out and find one that wants to stay at a certain level, a smaller college football level, but the coaches, they're not necessarily in it for the money. Once they get to a certain level, they're going to get paid X amount of money, and they're going to be well off. So the only thing left is the competition. It's to win. It's to get the brass ring. It's to win the national championship. And I think 1998 proved to Tommy Bowden that you just can't do it at Tulane. And that's why the president of Tulane right now is fighting so hard for a change in the BCS system, because if that change can take place, then like basketball and the NCAA playoffs and March Madness and the Final Four, it's possible that a smaller school or a school from a lesser or smaller conference could climb the ranks and make it all the way to number one. At least in basketball, the opportunity exists. In football, the opportunity doesn't exist. It's hand-selected. It's hand-picked. And I wish him luck. I wish him well. I think the smaller schools deserve that chance.
Wow. And now, if my old memory is right, when you stepped down from Tulane football, didn't you go to work for the Dale Carnegie Institute?
For 30 years, said, it's been a long time since you've been home on weekends. We have an empty nest syndrome. It would be real nice to have you home on weekends sometimes if you'd be willing to try something different. Now, trying something different wasn't real different because while I was at Tulane, one of the things I did was usually about once a week at night on my own time, I taught a Dale Carnegie course. either the Dale Carnegie course or the Leadership Training for Managers course or customized training for corporations as a corporate trainer. And my wife asked me if I would consider doing that or something like that on a full-time basis, and that's what I went ahead and tried to do. And it's different having weekends off, but it's also nice. It's a little bit of both. I miss it. I miss the broadcasting. I miss calling the games. I still do a few fill-in games for people at times as a substitute play-by-play man when people need me. But it's also nice to have weekends off and be with the family, and that's why I left.
I want to tell you why, the reason why I brought that up. About a year or two ago, there's a gentleman you and I both, I believe, like very much in radio named Ed Clancy.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe, wasn't it for one football season, you and Rich Marty used to do a Friday segment with him. Is that correct?
Well, he wanted it to be a Friday segment and then moved it to Mondays because rather than using a Friday looking ahead to the game, he decided to make it a Monday recap of the game. And we'd call in on Monday mornings and have a little fun. It was loose. We didn't get into heavy statistics. King Simeon was a producer at the time, and Terry Davis, who's doing the show now, was a producer at the time. And those guys added the hardcore statistics, and Rich and I just came through with some opinions, some one-liners, and just had a little fun. Of course, but the thing is, you can usually have fun all the time, because they'll give you the opportunity for a good one-liner here and a good one-liner there.
I take it without a doubt. Rich Marty just adds, a world of personality no matter where he goes.
Well, I appreciate Ed Clancy giving Rich and I that opportunity. We had so much fun with it. Ed and I worked together at Channel 8 television, and Ed was so good at what he did. I really missed his video cartoons, his television cartoons when he was on radio, his radio cartoons. He's one of the consummate and true talents in New Orleans, and my goodness, a station should scoop him up. He's sponsorable, and he can make a station a lot of money. He's got some stuff that people love to see. And he had fun on the air, and goodness, we had a lot of fun with him.
Before we part, there is another person I wanted to ask about, because I believe, this person started at KTIB, but I think you worked with this person for a while at Channel 8, Margaret Dubuisson.
Oh, Margaret Dubuisson and I worked at Channel 8 together, and again, she was one of the main anchors while I was there, and just a fabulous news person, a good journalist, photographed great on the air, down to earth as a person and a human being, had a smooth voice, just a great reader of the news, a great anchor on the air, made you feel like that it was a pleasure to have her as a guest in your living room every night while you were watching the news. And I enjoy flipping on the Channel 32, WLAE, and watching her. I believe she's doing some work with them, or it might be Channel 12, WYES. But I enjoy watching her do some work. She's still so accomplished.
Well, before we part ways tonight, is there anything you'd like to say to all the wonderful people listening right now?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how much Thibodeau and Houma mean to me. My wife, Karen Fungi Berthelot, is from Houma, and we go there often. It's a second home to us. And to have started my career there and had the opportunity to work at the stations KTIB-AM and FM, Channel 11, Lively 11 when it was on the air, KHOM with Ray Sadie. What a class act he was, and always a good friend. Helped me a lot, even long after I had left Houma and Thibodeau. That's a special part of our lives, and we'll always remember those good times. We always come back. We always visit with people. I would like to mention one person also, and that is Ed Bourne. It's actually Ed Bourne. And Ed is a very good friend who started at KTIB the same time I did. And I was just a young kid out of college, but Ed was a 40-year-old gentleman who decided he was going to change careers later in his life. He gave up a printing business to go into radio and television, and he was a news hound. He just reminded you of one of those old-time press guys that would have a hat on with a hat band, and they'd have a little sticker in it that said press. And he was always sniffing out the story, made friends and contacts on all of the police departments and sheriff's office teams, and was always there, whether it was at the KTIB or KHOM, to get the news and make sure that it was professionally done. Was close to Marie Bergeron also, and wow, what a great news team they made. And when he left also to go to KALB in Alexandria, I know his presence in news was sorely, sorely missed. And, well, what a great guy and a good friend, and I truly missed him in the world of broadcasting.
Well, Ken Berthelot, we can't say enough for you taking out all this time to be with us, and thank you for being part of the anniversary series.
Thank you very much for having me. This means an awful lot. KTIB was my first radio station ever, and it sure means a lot to still be part of it.